Welcome to the latest in a new series of EdSource Roundtables. My name is Ann Vasquez, the Executive Director of EdSource. Today at our virtual roundtable, we will talk to you about the early days of the new school year, and we'll hear from the perspective of teachers. Under yet another threat of a surge in COVID cases, public schools in California are back in session with in-person instruction. COVID testing, quarantines, and questions surrounding independent study feel all-consuming at the moment. However, today we want to focus instead on the underlying issue that's going to frame this next school year. How do students recover from 18 months of remote learning, isolation, and for some, trauma? How do teachers and schools build upon what they've learned over the last year and seize on the opportunity to try new methods and do things a little differently? This roundtable is made possible with the support of the Hewlett Foundation and the Gates Foundation. And if you haven't already, we encourage you to join EdSource's community network, as well as to sign up for our daily newsletter for an ongoing dialogue around education and equity. At our roundtable today, I wanted to make some introductions. We have Patricia Carlos, a national board certified teacher with 20 years experience at the elementary level. Welcome.
Good afternoon, it's a pleasure to be here.
Please also welcome Gwendolyn Delgado, a bilingual educator at La Mesa Junior High School, who has more than a decade experience working with bilingual and English learners. Gwendolyn also is a member of our EdSource Teacher Advisory Committee. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Larry Ferlazzo, an English and Social Studies teacher at Luther Burbank High in Sacramento, and he is also the author or editor of 12 books. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you for the invitation.
And also with us today is Jose Rivas, who teaches physics and engineering to high school students at the Lennox Mathematics, Science, and Technology Academy. Jose also is a member of our Teacher Advisory Committee at EdSource. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Hello. Nice to be here.
And we have Mark St. John, who is the founder and president of the Inverness Institute, an organization devoted to improving the improvement of education. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, we have our moderator today, EdSource's editor-at-large, John Fensterwald.
Great to be here, Ann.
Welcome, everyone. And John, why don't you kick things off?
Thanks. So we partner with Mark St. John and the Inverness Institute to publish their results this year of several surveys of 121 leading teachers in California. It was a comprehensive study and with interesting and really insightful results. If you haven't read them, we'll include a link in the podcast, in the roundtable. But Mark, take about 5 minutes, granted it will be a challenge, to summarize the key findings and implications for the year ahead.
Thank you for having me here. It's really a treat to realize this idea of having teachers, leading teachers, wonderful teachers, have a chance to tell the world what it's really like in the classrooms this year. Our institute is dedicated to improving education, and as we were saying, actually to figure out ways to improve the ways we improve education. So one of the ways that we think we can improve the improvement of education is to better understand reality. And so we set out upon this idea of finding 121, or the second survey, 136 teachers who are leading teachers. They are thoughtful, they are dedicated to improving their practice, they're dedicated to the profession, and they're highly diverse. They represent California. And we thought, why don't we invite these teachers, 100+ teachers, to be consultants? The state, the districts, the counties need expert consultants to figure out how to address the challenges of the pandemic. And we noticed a strange absence of voices of teachers. And we thought, what better thing to do than bring in 100 expert consultants to advise people about how to adjust, how to support teachers in classrooms in this era. So we rounded up these teachers. They agreed to serve, of course, and they served brilliantly. And they gave us very detailed comments and survey ratings. And I'll tell you a few of the things they told us over the past year. And this is an inadequate summary, and I highly recommend you just read what they say. It's been fascinating just to read the detailed comments that we've gotten. But here's a couple of things. One is, obviously, the past year has been very difficult for teachers, even these highly skilled expert teachers. They felt not understood or appreciated in the difficulties, the stresses, the challenges they were facing, and many are discouraged. Almost 40% of our group of teachers said for the first time, often many of them, they felt they're not sure they can continue in the profession. This is too difficult, especially without the support that they wanted. So where did teachers find the supports? Well, not surprisingly, perhaps, at least the teachers, the main source of support for teachers struggling to address the challenges of the pandemic came from, no surprise, other teachers. 80% said that was the most useful source. And they got access to those other teachers through online mechanisms, through networks, through professional journals, through websites. But it was teachers helping teachers that was the crucial set of supports. Less useful were district supports, state supports. In other words, the professional supports, the collegial supports were crucial. The system supports, not seen as useful. Teachers worried greatly during the pandemic about their students, the socio-emotional health of their students, and in particular, the disengagement of students. It's always a challenge when students disengage. And when you're in a pandemic Zoom environment, it's a huge challenge. And they worried about that. And they worried about the discrepancy between students, between classrooms, between districts. The pandemic laid bare the inequities of the system. And teachers really struggled with that. They were very challenged by that. And they want the system to better address these inequities. So when we asked teachers, well, what would you like from policy and from policymakers? Some of the things they mentioned were, look, we have to make this a human scale endeavor. We have to be able to deal with individual students. So we need to reduce class size. We need more professionals and supports and aides in the classrooms. We really need to pay attention to the social, emotional well-being of our students to the degree to which they're engaged or disengaged. They were far less worried about academic loss because they could recover that. They were far more worried about the socio-emotional health of their students. A few comments from our point of view, the Inverness Institute, when we heard all of this. One is it was a little bit like the canary in the coal mine. We said if 150 of California's best teachers are discouraged and feeling unappreciated and unheard and unable to share their expertise, that's a worrisome sign about the health of the system. And so I think the whole ability of the system to recognize and value and support teachers is a crucial question. Other kind of things that occurred to us in going into this next year. The reopening is not like a light switch. We're not going to just flip a switch and say, oh, we're reopened. Much has changed. Students have become less versed in, less skilled in classroom norms and routines. There's an awkwardness to socialization. There's the whole issue of working in a mask environment, et cetera. So reopening is going to be, I think, equally as challenging as the last year has been. The teachers in our group we found great variance in the degree to which they felt supported by districts, by principals, by parents, but a great many of them felt that their districts were out of touch. That's their language. And that the administrators, for reasons of political pressure or capacity or other reasons, were not able to respond in useful ways. So the degree to which we have a system to support teachers. The teachers are teaching, and the system is supposed to support them. But this group of expert, smart teachers felt not supported by their systems all too often. I would say one more thing is just the state and the district can do more to honor to honor teacher expertise, to recognize it, and to create structures like networks that allow teachers to teach each other. And then finally, I would just say the sources of inequity are multiple. Teachers worry greatly about them. And this is an opportunity to identify and address some of the sources that create just huge inequities of student learning experience and opportunity. Okay, I've gone on enough. I'll stop there.
Actually, that was really good. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. That was a really excellent summary and sobering now for our teachers on the panel as to what to face this year and perhaps how little support their peers have found elsewhere during this past year. So let's bring it up to now. Let's find out, you know, we talked about disengagement and the first days go back. Have you found disengagement? How have you found your students socially and emotionally? And how are you providing support? Jose, why don't you kick it off for us?
So yeah, we were out for a year and a half, and our students were eager to come back to the classroom. You know, one of the things that, so I teach engineering, and they were eager to just start hands-on work and start getting their hands dirty, so to say, in terms of building things. But there was a lot of kids that had extreme anxiety. You know, I had one girl that, you know, was threw up just because there were so many people in the room that she just couldn't handle it. And so she had to, you know, I gave her space, and that's what we can do. Give her space, give the students space to move and do what they need to do to calm themselves. But yeah, it's you know, it's a mixed bag depending on the student. There's some that are gung-ho and some of them that are still trying to get used to coming back.
There's definitely this social anxiety going on amongst the kids that even though they are very excited to be back on campus, there is still this, they're holding themselves back. And part of that is that they're holding themselves back because they don't know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. I know from my curriculum, my content ethnic studies, there's a lot of dialogue that has to occur within the classroom among students. And when I invite them to turn to their partner and have a conversation, you see that hesitation. You see them staring at me like, am I allowed to do this? Do I take off my mask to do this? I have to repeat, do not take off your mask. Just try to have that conversation at the distance that I have the desk. And so the kids are just very hesitant to do it. Part of it is because of all the guidelines and restrictions that we have in the classroom, but also it's just amongst themselves too. They've been isolated and they've been on their own. And now to have this social interaction with all these restrictions, they just don't know what to do or how to do it.
Patricia, give us the perspective of an elementary school teacher.
I would have to say I'm listening to both of them, and I would have to agree. I teach 9 and 10-year-olds, and I mean, the excitement is there. They want to do a lot of hands-on. They don't want the computer. That's one thing I have noticed. They're constantly, no, we don't want to do anything on the computer. As far as interacting with one another, they're anxious to do that, but it goes back to what Gwendolyn was saying. They ask a lot of questions. Can we do this? Can we turn our desks? Can we sit next to each other? I've noticed that even small things, we have to remind them, you know, like even just taking out a piece of paper, a pencil, very basic things that before, when I started 4th grade, it was something they already knew. But coming back, I mean, I see a huge change where that changes my dynamic as far as teaching and my expectations. Going back to pretty much ground zero. Computer work was the thing, but now being in the classroom, they're like, we don't want computers. We want to do more hands-on thing, more projects where they have to touch the paper, the pencil. They keep asking for art. They keep asking to interact with others. But then again, there are few, like was mentioned before, they're afraid. They don't want to talk to others. I've had those issues with a couple students. They want to be by themselves. So I think, you know, there's a lot of those issues of what can they do, what they cannot do.
So how can you encourage participation? Because I know during the pandemic, especially on Zoom, there was always a concern of turning off the video camera. And I think in some classrooms, there was a grade attached to participation to encourage people to stay on camera. So in person after the year that these students have had, how do you encourage participation? And I'm sure it's different at the high school level as it is than in the elementary level.
Well, we don't start until Thursday, so I've got 2 more days, but I should preface it all by saying it was interesting. I was in the classroom at our school preparing my classroom, and a teacher came by and said, "Hey, you excited?" And I thought for a second, and I am excited, but I think I have a greater sense of apprehension. And I don't think I've ever had that feeling before going into a new school year. I think going into the school year, I think one of the most important things and priorities for me are trying to build community and helping students build community among themselves. So in past years, I'd spend a day or two on community building activities, but I plan on spending a substantially larger amount, ranging from playing Two Truths and a Lie to doing a lot of activities from facing history, like students identifying, framing an important object in their life and why. Really trying to help students get to know each other, because there is not, it's been 18 months, and getting to know each other online is very different from getting to know each other in person. So I think that's the most important thing that I plan to do to try to deal with the issue of apprehension for me and for students.
So how are other teachers going to be rebuilding relationships?
Yeah, it's for me, it's just talking. So one of the things that drove educators before, it was either school mandate, district mandate, curriculum, right? And like Larry said, you would spend a couple of days, building relationships, community. But for me, that's in the back burner, that curriculum stuff, because these kids just want to talk. They want someone to, hey, I noticed that you like anime, and let's talk about it, and it's not pushing the curriculum on them. We're going to get through the stuff, they're going to learn, but it's that interpersonal relationship building with the teacher and also with the other students. That's what's critical. And if you can build those relationships, then they become more comfortable in the classroom, and then they're willing to share how they're feeling that day, troubles that are going on in their lives. And that's why we're here, right? It's not just to shove curriculum into their minds, but it's to understand that they are people and they need to be heard and they need to feel safe.
That community is so important. You got to do that SEL work in order for them to feel comfortable with you and with each other. And as the more you do it, the more they're going to be responding to what's happening in the classroom. And then you kind of just sneak in that curriculum here and there. I know with my curriculum, it's really easy to embed it through conversation. So just being able to have that SEL moment, build in a little bit of that curriculum, and then just kind of go back to that SEL moment as well. And that community building really will help with your participation. But even just the little things that you can do in the classroom to make them feel safe. I was talking with Jose how I sanitize my class, even though it's not required of me. I sanitize my materials, the art supplies. I do that so I could bring down the anxiety in the classroom. So then there is that comfort level of my teacher is taking care of me in this way. And so when it comes to participation, I feel comfortable. And then there's going to be some kids that just don't want to participate, and you can't push it on them right now. You can't force them. You're just going to have to respect that they need that individual space, as Jose has said, and just maybe talking to them after class and just saying, hey, is everything okay? I just want to check in with you. Maybe we could try again tomorrow. And if you need that support, let me know.
Sort of brings up the issue of sort of what did you learn from last year that you will apply this year, and how will you approach lessons and your teaching differently this year? You touched on that, Gwen. I'm sure all of you have given thought about how you might do things differently this year in your classes.
For me, because I work with a lot of the English language learners, the way I'm approaching supporting them has changed. Before, it was more structured on the ELD standards and making sure that we were prepared for LPAC and making sure teachers had the right resources and support. And this year, especially with our ELs and the trauma that they are coming in, it is again more focused on your safety, on your mental health, more getting our EL community aware of the dialogue that can occur between and the community that can occur between a school and the families, and letting our EL families know that we are a strong resource for them. So please utilize us. So kind of for that way and that avenue for that specific student, I have taken a much different route than I would have 2 years ago.
One clear way that I'm going to be doing things a little differently is in the past. I mean, I've always been an advocate, I think, of student voice in the classroom, but I think in last year online, it became very clear to me that the only way to make a class successful was to really have multiple teachers. So we developed leadership teams in all of the classes that people would take responsibility for leading small groups. They'd meet with me weekly to evaluate how the class was going. They do self-assessments on their leadership skills. And also I did weekly Google Form check-ins with the whole class, but where students gave feedback. So I think it's clear to me that those are two practices that I'm going to be continuing in, that I think it's similar, that the class will always work better when there is student voice and student leadership, as opposed to just me in the front.
A viewer asked whether you think that students are getting enough mental health support. Are there enough resources in your school to get them through certainly the first several months?
I think it depends on the school and the school district. Some schools are doing a remarkable job. I know our school is doing a remarkable job in terms of focusing on SEL and having activities. And, we're having an activity this week where they're going to be doing, community building with obstacle courses and, all these outside activities. So I guess it depends on the school and their folks. I know some schools want to focus on grades, and nothing ever happened. And they're going back to business as usual. And they're, I see that in my daughter's school. They're just going to business as usual, no support, no reflection on the students, as if nothing happened. So I think it depends on the school and the teachers that, that really want to make an impact in how they approach SEL in their classroom.
I have to agree with what Jose said. It really depends on the school. I know here since day one, we've had people come into the classroom, talk, had activities, acknowledge how they feel, their anxiety, different activities. So it's been something that's been at the forefront, instead of, like what he was saying, grades, standards. So the emotional aspect has been touched upon, but I do agree. It just depends on the school and the district, how they're managing and handling that.
One thing our district is doing, especially our school is doing pretty well, is there's also a focus on the SEL for the teacher themselves. There's a large support system that we are now rallying around each other. Our admin is providing us a lot of resources, even just time to come out of our classrooms and take them, especially for those of us who have larger classes. They come in and give us like this little breathing time so that we can actually step out and kind of relieve ourselves, because being in such a large classroom can ourselves produce anxiety. So even the SEL focus around teachers has enhanced.
I like that idea. I don't know if other districts are doing that. Let's talk about the academics, and you're used to having at the start of school students with a range of coming in with a range of readiness for your classes. But is it different this year? And are the disparities wider, and is it in ways that surprise you, based not necessarily on who you would expect, but given the fact that students have had different experiences over the past year? And how is that reflected, and how do you then deal with that? Why the wide differences that you probably are seeing?
I'm that crazy teacher that has an individual learning plan for every single one of my students, 130 plus students. So, and this was before pandemic. So I knew where everyone was at. I knew where everyone needed to be and where they needed to go. And so, when we went pandemic mode, I mean, that that approach that I had was really beneficial because, and I have a lot of the students again in my classes because they take advanced level engineering or, AP physics. So because I had those individual learning plans, other than, just looking at their grades, but I knew where they were coming from. And so when we got back to the class, I knew where I was at least within my content. And I knew where I had to take them, this year. So a lot of, conferences with students and, okay, I see this is where you're at, this is where we need to go. And this individualized approach has been super beneficial. And because of this approach, you can integrate SEL into it. So I'm not losing the learning in the SEL because it's incorporated into how I approach each student and where they need to be. So, if you look at growth mindset, what am I looking at for each of the students? Where do I want them to be based on that? Now there's, a lot of little strategies and things that you need to apply into your curriculum to make that work, which, that could be another roundtable just to talk about that. But it is possible to incorporate SEL without losing that learning. But for my approach, it was individual learning plans for every single student.
For those of us who have taught or teach English language learners, especially at the secondary level, what we do and what we have done for years is substantial differentiation to move students up pretty quickly, right? We get a newcomer in 9th or 10th grade who may have interrupted formal education. We're able to use acceleration strategies like looking at students through the lens of assets instead of deficits. What do they bring? Scaffolds like writing frames, looking at developing the conditions to enhance intrinsic motivation. There are lots of things that we do every day. And I think that those can be applicable to deal with. I think all teachers differentiate every year, and we've got to differentiate probably a little, wider this year. But I think if teachers use a lot of the strategies that ELL teachers have used for years, that we'll all be well served. And we don't necessarily need to have contracts with companies who are billing, around acceleration strategies and programs.
Piggybacking on what we've been talking about, how do you manage the expectations of parents coming out of the pandemic in terms of where they see their children are at versus perhaps where they actually are?
So over the summer, I was the principal for summer school, overseeing one of our school sites for the district. And I think a lot of parents were almost naive about where their students were at, especially when it came to credits. There's a lot of students who are credit deficient right now. And there was this expectation that, okay, well, as long as they take summer school, that's it, right? They're caught up with their credits. And it was like, oh no, your student unfortunately failed multiple classes. This is going to take a process where they might have to go to night school, or they might have to go to an online learning on top of their normal school year and go to summer school again. And parents were just in complete disbelief that, how did this happen to my student? How could they be short this many credits? And as I explained to families, well, when you fail multiple classes the way your student did, that we have to find a way to recover. So families were almost in shock to find out how credit deficient their student were. And now, especially at the high school level, how does my student even graduate? How do they get out of this hole? And what is the school going to do for my student? And it's almost like a lot of the responsibility is now coming back on the school, on the teachers, on the counselors of, what are you going to do to get my student out of this?
Yeah, it's a particular high school issue, Larry. Jose, do you have an approach to that?
I've been getting lots of calls from parents prior to the beginning of school. I think they're just want to make sure that it's actually happening in person. So I think right now, at least in our district, since we haven't actually begun, there's still disbelief that we actually will have in-person instruction after 18 months. So I'm sure the concerns will change once they actually see that it's happening, but that's the primary concern that I'm hearing.
I'd like to jump in. I'm curious about an idea. I think if you don't know classrooms very well or something, you sort of think, oh, the teacher is just teaching fourth grade and all fourth graders are similar. So we're just moving the average student through to fifth grade. And I think a real challenge for teachers is the huge diversity in the class in terms of interest and skills, abilities, and temperaments. And do you think, you all are very skillful teachers, and I'm curious, when you think about the system as a whole, do you think the pandemic has made the diversity or the variance in students greater, so that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, so to speak? Is there going to be a real need to be able to address students who have disengaged, or students who are socially anxious? Or I'm curious as to your assessment of this challenge that all teachers face, which is I've got to deal with this huge range of teachers and students in my class. Has that grown greater since the pandemic?
It's interesting that a couple of days ago, I did a test. It was pretty much my test, an assessment to see where everyone was. And this was for reading skills. And I found something very interesting. I compared it to scores prior to the pandemic. And there was a bit of discrepancy, which, to be honest, I expected a larger discrepancy. So what I then did, I asked certain students, so, what did you do during the pandemic? What were some of the things that you were doing? And it was all dependent on what we're talking about, the resources, how much parent involvement there was, were the parents there supporting us too? Like we could give it our all, but I think if parents weren't stepping in, then that played a huge role. So I was very intrigued by the results because I expected a huge gap. I said, oh my goodness, my students are going to be here. But to be quite honest, at least at looking at the data in my classroom, it was just a slight difference. Now, I would go back to what we've been talking about, the emotional and social aspect. I think in terms of what we have to deal with every school year, it's pretty much the same challenge. Going back to what Jose said, the individualized learning plans. It depends how you approach teaching, what kind of teacher you are, how you look at students. But even prior to a pandemic, I looked at the social emotional aspect of a student. I always found that very interesting, that I wanted to get to know the students, like what was their likes, what do we have in common? Because I almost feel that as a teacher, you have to reach students based on, what do I like? What do they like? Build that relationship amongst them. And so I was actually surprised, to be quite honest. I do have some that are way beyond the spectrum where others are, but that's not something very surprising that I would have any other school year. But like I said, when I spoke to them, the biggest difference was the parent involvement during the pandemic. Like, were the parents there? Were they helping them? Were they aiding them? So I was pleasantly surprised with some because I think I anticipated certain things. So I think at the end of the day too, it comes back to the parent relationship and those relationships that we built with the parents, with the student, the teamwork. So I'm looking forward. I know there's going to be challenges, but like Jose said, even prior to the pandemic, I looked at every student, like, what are their needs? What are their strengths? How am I going to take my teaching and go from there? So just interesting results.
This idea too, that if you do too much SEL, you can't do rigor. And that's completely false. I teach AP Physics, I teach Advanced Engineering, and I'm doing both. You can do SEL, you can do rigor. The thing with SEL is that it opens up the student more to share and to care about what they're doing and to take ownership of their learning, which is what you want. You want their students to be engaged in the classroom. So you need those SEL components in order to engage them in more rigorous activities, because otherwise they'll shut down. And you don't want them to shut down. And everyone is at different levels, and every single teacher knows that. My AP Physics class, I gave them a really basic algebra problem, and some of them struggled, and that's fine. So where do I take them from there, right? Should I say, oh, you lost so much learning that you can't do, a basic algebra problem? Or do I help them, okay, this is how, we forgot some things, right? So let's remember how to do these things and then just keep on building. So it goes hand in hand, right? So it's not looking at the deficits. We're looking at, what they're bringing in, the positives, and then improving on what they're capable of doing. Because if you look at deficits, it's going to be a very long day and you're not going to want to be a teacher anymore. You got to push the kids. You need the rigor, but that SEL is what gets them to engage in that rigorous high level stuff.
I'm glad you raised that, because that was going to be my next question, Jose, and how is it either or how do you integrate? But one question I had was, tutoring is often seen in many districts, or at least many states have actual organized tutoring as a priority. And I'm wondering whether any of your schools or districts are using tutoring. Is that useful? And it's usually seen as the most effective, called high dose tutoring while the class is happening. But then the state has appropriated lots of money for after school activities this year. And so where would that fit in? Do you think it's helpful? Should it be a priority for the money the state has?
Well, I think tutoring, I think you're right. The research does show that tutoring in small groups by trained tutors is very effective. You got to find the trained tutors, and you want a situation where you want students to want to do it, right? Sometimes I get a little frustrated. There are lots of studies about different interventions that supposedly work, but if you can't get anybody to do it, it's not going to work. So, you need to be in a situation where students want to have the extra tutoring. And one of the challenges that we have is students are basically many of our students are out of the house for the first time. Do they want to go into tutoring after school, or do they want to hang out with their friends in other situations after school? And then the other issue is finding people who want to be tutors. And I just think with everything that's going on, I know in our district, I would be surprised if we are organized enough to pull some kind of system of tutoring off. Though we are trying to do some locally based after school activities for students.
So on that point, Larry, there was a question from one of our audience members about what you feel like the district. Do you feel like you have support? Do you all feel support from the district, that they understand what the issues are?
I talk to a lot of teachers, right? I do a teacher advice column at Ed Week, so I have lots of communication with folks. And I think one of the key things that have happened over the last 18 months is that the lack of skilled leadership in many districts has become transparent. That in ordinary times, really district leaders don't really have that many important decisions to make, right? Districts are a bureaucracy. Things just happen. And when they make unwise decisions, we teachers can generally do a good job of protecting our students from the impacts of them. But so now, over the last 18 months, districts have been put in a position where they have to make a lot of important decisions. And we teachers can't really protect a lot of our students from the impacts of those. Whether it's if an independent study program isn't being set up, if programs to follow up with students who have disappeared. And, because of that, I think there's been a lot of mistakes made. And I think one of the big challenges is that district leadership in many situations believe they are the smartest people in the room and do not want to engage with teachers. I come from a Catholic worker background, and the Catholic Church has the principle of subsidiarity, as John mentioned in our earlier conversation. Governor Jerry Brown talked about that same thing, about people closest to the problem generally have a pretty good idea of how to solve it. And I think a lot of the successful districts have truly engaged with teachers, parents, and students, and the unsuccessful ones have not done so.
I mean, each of you is focusing particularly on building community and social emotional learning in the first several weeks. And so I'm curious, is this an individual decision? Did your schools talk about it as a priority, or will you be seen as going rogue based on our roundtable today? Or is it generally accepted? Is there general agreement as to what you're doing as a school and where you fit into that?
For us at Golden Valley, it was actually led by our administration. They wanted to make sure that we put curriculum on the back burner and that the focus was on our students, especially their mental health, and then relaying information onto the counselors as we got information from students. And so they intentionally gave us training so that we weren't all doing the same SEL projects or the same dialogues with them. They really kind of were hands-on with us to make sure that we were equipped ourselves to have a proper SEL lesson ready for the students. So for us, administration was key on making sure we felt ready to have those type of conversations and have those type of lessons with our students.
Yeah, we have built in a team advisory, which we have a group of students that we follow from 9th to 12th grade. So those components of, advisement and supporting and guiding are, built into our school. And yeah, of course, we did get additional resources to support SEL instruction during that class time. And also, within our regular content, activities that promote community. So we did get some training, where admin has been really proactive at our school in terms of providing, outside opportunities for students, activities during school, to help them, support them, and support us too, because we can't do all the work ourselves either as teachers. So, it's not just throwing it on us, it's everyone in the school community working together, and then also working with the parents and having them understand, what the process is, why are we doing the things that we're doing.
Going through some of the comments, you're getting a lot of support for exactly the kinds of things that you're doing. And one of the questions was, what are your schools and districts doing for your well-being coming off a difficult year?
Our local administrators are very, very supportive. I mean, they could not be more supportive. I'm not really sure what our district is doing. Okay, but our certainly at our school, the priority of well-being for teachers is very high. And I mean, I'm more concerned about the well-being of our administrators who have been, I mean, we teachers have been working really hard, but administrators have really been working hard, and they didn't get much of the summer off, and they've got a huge weight on their shoulders. And if they're in districts with unskilled district leadership, it just makes it all the more harder for them, because they spend a lot of time protecting us teachers, from the mistakes of the district leaders.
Mark has a question actually for you, but it would be open to anyone actually, is, what's being done for new teachers this year? I mean, I can't imagine starting, maybe you all can talk about if this were your first year. Is there anything being done for your colleagues who are coming into school fresh?
Well, I have, it's interesting. This school year I came back, we're a group of three fourth grade teachers, and 2 of them are new on the team. I have one that's been teaching for 5 years, and the other one, this is her 2nd year. So of course she had a lot of anxiety, the one that's year 2. And she's like, I'm so nervous, I'm so anxious. And it's funny that I said, well, don't be. I said, because even though I have 20 years under my belt, I'm like, I feel like I'm starting all over again. In terms of support, she has all the support that she needs. The expectations are there, with an understanding of, she's getting used to a lot of things, as well as, even just adjusting, coming back. But I found it interesting when I was having a conversation with her yesterday that I said, I feel like it's my first year in teaching. Although I've done it for a long time, a lot of the things that I had in place for many years have changed. Why? Because I'm adjusting to what I've learned through, of course, when it was distance learning, adjusting to their needs right now. So whatever I did many years coming back on the first days, that's out the window. So I'm just reinventing myself after 20 years. And I think every school year we reinvent ourselves with our students. I mean, they teach us a lot of things. I've had to make changes with technology, learn, of course, yet more technology. But I'm excited. I know it's very stressful. And like we've been talking about many changes, but yet I think this opens a window to many new things. Like, how do I integrate technology versus maybe in elementary school, we didn't do too much of it. But now, you know, the kids are accustomed, they're used to doing things. So how do we integrate it, but at the same time, keep what they want? Because like I referenced and said, they want a lot of hands-on. But I would think that as a new teacher, at least that teacher in our school, she has a lot of support from all of us. It doesn't matter the grade level, administration. And that's another thing I was going to touch upon. It's funny that throughout the pandemic, I built a stronger relationship with my principal than when I did in person. I don't know what it was about all us knowing that we were connected on a computer, but I just felt we exchanged more ideas. We understood each other much more. Not that my principal didn't, but I just feel it's a whole different respect. Back to what Larry was saying, respect for my principal. Not that I didn't have it before, but now I see all the different angles and much more, and my colleagues, and I learned a lot from them. You know, what are they doing in a certain grade level that maybe I had no idea? Or what ideas can I take and integrate them into mine? So I think we have, if we want to look like at what Jose was saying, we could look at negatives, but if we focus on the positives, I think we can grow from that and change into something better.
Patricia, you had mentioned technology, and that's, I think, one of the lessons of the last year was how to incorporate technology into the classroom in a way that's useful and helps with mastery. How in this new year are you continuing to incorporate technology, or are you whipping back to analog? I will say, as a parent of two children, one in high school, one now in middle school, she was in 5th grade last year. I think in terms of executive function, technology helped a lot, because you can see what the expectations were and what was due and when it was due. I think I see differences in terms of the grade levels, in terms of how they are using technology. So I'm curious how you all are planning to or are using technology going forward.
Well, going forward, I'll continue to use technology. It'll be a combination of things. I mean, there are certain things that as a teacher, it was very useful. Students that were very shy and maybe didn't want to do certain things, I noticed they just kind of blossomed through technology. I won't take it away. I will integrate it. A lot of my EL learners, I saw a lot of things that were positives using technology. So there's a lot of positive takeaways. I think had the pandemic not occurred, at least from my viewpoint, teaching 4th grade, I think I would have still been in a bubble and maybe not even expose myself to many things that I learned throughout. And I saw many different angles of students. So I learned a lot of interesting things through technology. I think there was a positive. I think there has to still be a balance, because I mean, students just enjoy seeing us and being in the classroom, but I will definitely keep it. That's not something I'm taking away.
Yeah, I'm an extremely analog teacher. I teach engineering, I teach physics, I teach program, I teach a lot of technology, but I'm very analog. You know, we'll use rulers, we'll use protractors, we'll use compasses and stuff like that. But, you know, like Patricia said, there is a balance with technology. And, you know, I learned to use technology better from the pandemic so that it enhances the analog activities that I have in terms of participation, in terms of, you know, having students see what the other students are working on and commenting and debating and defending ideas. And, you know, and even the Zoom. So now there's so much flexibility where I don't have to have, for example, after school tutoring in my class. I could tell my students, all right, guys, we're going to meet from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. If you want to log in, we'll go over, whatever the homework problems, or we could discuss the lab report or discuss your engineering designs. So there's a lot more flexibility that I welcome, because, now we can, there's more time to meet with the students if that's necessary. And if they want to meet with you, they could just contact you on Zoom and say, hey, do you have like 5 minutes? I just want to really quick, what's going on with this problem? And like, sure, and I have it on my phone. Hey, what's going on? Let's talk. So that type of flexibility, I am going to continue to use.
That's fantastic.
I would concur with what Jose and Patricia shared. And one of the things that I plan on doing is giving students the option of when it's time to do projects and activities, they can go paper or poster, they could go Google Slides. But of course, in this kind of discussion of technology, there's the elephant in the room this year for schools, which is quarantining. And the importance of technology and trying to figure into dealing with that, because many of us are going to have students who are quarantined or have classes quarantined or be quarantined ourselves, right? And so I really want to do both, but I am concerned. I mean, we need to sort of keep everything online all times as an option, because I don't think any of us know the next day where we or a good portion of our students are actually going to be.
And so I have completely moved away from technology. I am all paper right now. I am all posters and dialogue and debates and Socratic seminars. And the reason why is because I really felt the burnt out amongst our students. I felt the burnt out amongst myself as well, that I needed to unplug just for my own well-being as well as an educator. And I find that my teachers, my students are enjoying it. They don't mind it at all. It's pushing them to be creative again, where they need to come up with a thought on their own instead of Googling a thought. They have to produce artwork that is their own products. So it's really kind of getting that critical thinking and analytical thinking in a way that's away from the tech, away from the persuasion of Google, and really forcing them to create their own thoughts and opinions. So I have moved away. It's not that I will never do technology. Obviously, I'll move back towards it. I set up the Google Classroom already, because like Larry's mentioning, I have kids who are quarantined right now. And so I have to do live sessions for them. So while I'm in class teaching, my students are watching me as they're quarantined. So I am uploading on Google Classroom and doing separate activities for them. But overall, I just feel like at this moment, we need to unplug just for our own sanity. And so I have moved away from tech unless necessary.
Really interesting. We're really almost coming towards the end. And before I ask a bigger question, I have one that must be from a teacher, and I'm just kind of intrigued. Or do you feel chained to the front of a room because of distancing requirements? Do you feel like you can't move around the room as you normally would?
I'm moving. I am moving in between desks. I am checking up on my students, especially because I am the EL teacher on campus. I am up close, and I know I shouldn't be, but it's just old habits die hard. So I am not chained to the front of my desk, and I'm not chained to my web camera anymore. I'm interacting with them. And I think when they see me moving, again, it helps with that comfort level of the classroom, that if she's comfortable, we should be comfortable too.
Yeah, same here. I'm moving around. I clocked in 3 miles today in my classroom for my Fitbit. So I'm moving, I'm engaging. I do keep the distance, as much as I can. Some of them are, they're designing on breadboards, they're designing circuits. So I do need to take a look, but, it's almost back to normal, in some respects. So, I try to keep the desks about 3 feet, from each other, and got Purell on all the tables. And like Gwen said, I'm wiping all the time and cleaning. But yeah, it's nice to move. It's nice to be moving around again.
Right. I'm envious. I clocked about 100 yards between the kitchen and the office today. So you got me beat. So you began talking from the start about this push to go back to the way things are from the start. You feel that pressure from your schools and the like. And I'm interested to knowing, what should this new normal be? What changes from the pandemic do you think that schools need to think about moving ahead? And is there any hope that post-pandemic, whatever it is that your priorities, is there any chance that the discussion begin and perhaps even be adopted? Whoever.
Well, since I'm going to be sort of a downer, I'll start first, and other people can be a little more uplifting. I think that the districts who have learned the lesson that genuine engagement with teachers, our unions, parents, and students, that they've seen how much better this bad situation has been, that they have learned that and will continue to learn that. And I think that in districts that have not done that and have not engaged with stakeholders and have viewed themselves as the smartest people in the room, will not learn the lesson that that's the wrong way to go, and that they will continue to repeat the same mistakes.
All right, that's process, which is good. But what is it that you want to change? Anybody?
Well, I say engagement.
Okay.
Talking is the, not making plans without engaging with everybody else who is involved in the life of the school district.
Anyone else?
Go ahead, Gwen.
Oh, I was going to say, breaking this traditional model of education. It doesn't work for everyone, and it doesn't work for all populations. And so just finding, like Jose was saying, that he could go on a Zoom from 6:30 to 7:30 in the evening and support students. We weren't really doing that before, and we weren't doing that because that's not in the traditional hours of schooling. And if you weren't getting that traditional model, then what else was your option? And I think this really opened up our eyes that there are kids and families that need something different, that need something that is just as supportive, and providing these equitable opportunities so that growth can happen. And really just sticking to this traditional model is not working. And so breaking that normacy and providing the equitable resources, providing the support systems, and even providing the schedule of time for students that need something different. I think schools, districts need to wake up and start providing that for these students and families.
Jose, Patricia, last word on that?
Yeah, I think what the pandemic showed us is that we can reinvent how we approach education. And I think now is the time to reinvent. And and I see, where Larry's coming from. It depends on the district. It depends on the school if these changes can happen, and I would say, honestly, if your district or school doesn't want to reinvent, then go rogue and reinvent yourself, because in the end, you're doing what's best for your students, and they'll appreciate it, and the parents will appreciate it. And if you're all working together, then that reinvention that you're trying to push, that new approach to teaching, to new approach to grading, new approach to growth mindset, then that's going to make a huge impact in those lives. But ideally, you'd want the school and the district to provide, or to give that support, if possible. So.
Well, Anne, I think we have a topic for another roundtable. So
I think we do. I really appreciate all the participation from the audience. I know we didn't get to every question, but believe me, we have more roundtables to come. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists. Thank you for taking the time out of your day, your very busy days, and to all of our audience members for joining us today for our Back to School Roundtable. And thank you to all of our funders who make these types of roundtables possible. I would like to encourage all of you to join us next month for our discussion about California's new transitional kindergarten program. Thank you all. Have a great night.